double pawns are a good idea, and that for a number of pretty unexpected reasons. But before we get into that, I want to address how critical this topic actually really is. According to some very experienced coaches, this is the most popular misconception in the game of chess. Interestingly enough, nowadays, there is very clear proof of that. Just take a look on this mainstream variation of the Caro-Kann, which starts after e4 c6, d4 d5, knight c3, d takes on e4, knight takes on e4, where for decades, because of this misconception, everyone was playing bishop to f5 almost exclusively, which nowadays started to drop a little bit in popularity. And the reason is pretty funny. Imagine that top-level grandmasters started playing almost only the move knight f6. Yes, voluntarily allowing the double pawns. Now, this leads us to the question, why? What could have modern computers possibly discovered all of a sudden in a position championed by some of the greatest players of all time, like Anatoly Karpov and Vishy Anand? I mean, sure, the extra layer of security around Black's king feels pretty nice. But that alone cannot compensate the fact that White is better in all the endgames because of their queenside majority. Now, to better understand this topic, I'm gonna be walking you through the incredibly simple but effective strategy that you can use at any level to outsmart your opponent with the double pawns. This, of course, by sharing my experience as an international master and coach for adult improvers. Alright everybody, getting the black pieces, and against e4, the most common move for white, we're gonna be going for the Caro-Kann. Okay, now this may look a little bit weird if you have never played a Caro-Kann before, because the strategy behind it looks to be a little bit counterintuitive, because you get taught that as white, or in general, you should be aiming for these two squares. If you could like place your pawns there in the center, you're gonna have already an advantage. You have no idea how to capitalize on that, but you're gonna have an advantage, so you want that. Because it's just like controlling so many squares. And usually the most common moves for black are either e5 or c5, making sure whenever the pawn gets there, we can just get rid of it. So why do we play the Caro-Kann if we simply let white go d4? Now, you could think of it as basically we're trying to get an improved version of the Scandinavian opening. So the Scandinavian opening goes d5 right away, trying to destroy white's center. The small drawback with Scandinavian is that after ed5, we have to develop the queen very early on in the game by capturing the pawn, and then the enemy knight is going to be able to develop while gaining a tempo, therefore putting us a little bit behind. Scandinavian opening is playable, interesting, however not my favorite. I really recommend the Caro-Kann if you're somewhere like, let's say, a beginner who just picked up chess, or you're, let's say, intermediate player. Even for like a title player, strong player that's like trying to become like a FIDE master or maybe even higher, I would recommend the Caro-Kann. It's an opening that I played almost exclusively to reach the international master title. So, opponent goes knight c3. Kind of similar to d4 in a way, but we're just gonna do the same move. And the main idea and the advantage compared to the Scandi is that we can take back with a pawn and have a pawn in the center. So we're just kind of preparing it in a way. There is also another opening that's like a little bit similar with that idea, which is the so-called French defense. Playing e6 and then d5, idea being to be able to take back with a pawn. However, when you play e6, the bishop is gonna be locked inside the pawn chain. That is kind of the main drawback of the French. Now, if you look at it, the Caro-Kann, the bishop is open. So that's kind of nice about it. And opponent plays the move knight f3 here, which is the so-called two knights variation. Usually when they play knight c3, especially for lower rated games, I would be expecting a lot of ed5, which is transposing into the exchange variation, or as well as e5, getting a little bit of like an odd advanced variation. So knight f3 is a little bit unexpected. If you're playing like below 1000, you'd be surprised that f3 actually gets played sometimes, and It's actually crazy that literally all of my students play that position so bad when black is actually supposed to just get almost winning advantage. I mean, they just say just a very promising position because after f3, a very common mistake that I see almost all of my students are making exclusively. They go like, oh, d4, we play Caro-Kann, we have to take. But if you think about it, the drawback of f3 is that it's taking away the square for the knight. So if you take, they can take back with a pawn. The knight will have a square and they open the f-file. That is pretty good for white. And if they play f3, actually best is to simply keep white's pawn there, restricting the knight and keep advancing in the center. With d4, the knight will have to go on to like a pretty awkward square. I mean, usually whenever you can like kick the knight, play d4, the knight really needs to have a safe home and feel comfortable there. I mean, we just want to make sure that after d4, the knight has to live with his parents. So probably has to go to like b1. We could continue with advancing in the center, play e5, and easily develop our pieces. So that's a little bit of context on what you normally face in this position. Another interesting sideline, let's say for more like higher rated games, could be queen f3, but that is super rare. I never really see it in my students' games below 1500. So knight f3, very popular move, very common, which is also similar to the positions that you're gonna get after d4, which is the classical variation, where the typical idea is that, well, normally you kind of always want to go de4 and basically destroy white's center. The main idea is because we want to be able to play knight f6 and develop, but usually the problem is they could just go e4, hitting the knight, and the knight does not have a safe square. That's why we need to take on e4 usually, except when they can take back with a pawn, okay? That's like the exception of the rule. If they can take back with a pawn, don't take on e4, okay? Just to make it very clear. So after knight f3, first we want to go for d takes on e4. And after knight takes on e4, you have definitely a bunch of moves, but the main point is to stick with the most natural developing move, just going knight f6 and offering this knight trade. Yes, we do allow the double pawns, but that's going to be leading to a pretty thematic structure for the Caro-Kann, the so-called Tartakower. Besides that, you could see moves such as knight g3, knight g5, or knight c3 back, which are known to be harmless. Anyways, we covered that on the channel many times. The only kind of important mention is that on knight g3, I like to go for the fianchetto because that's restricting the knight and it's actually quite easy to play. After knight takes on f6, we always take back with the e-pawn, making sure that we're going to have a very nice pawn formation on the king side. And then the main idea is we play bishop d6. We want a castle. We play bishop g4. This knight goes to d7. This rook goes to the open file. Whenever they play h3, we always keep the bishop on h5 in the Tartakower. Then the knight goes to f8. And I like to set up a very sneaky battery with bishop c7, queen d6. And that will usually give us a lot of play against the enemy king. I'm sure you can already visualize black's pressure. But anyways, you'll get what I mean. So, I know this may look a little bit scary and kind of intimidating that I'm going this deep into the line, but that's how you want to think about it. And the main reason why you want to sort of visualize all these arrows and where your pieces are going, because this is what really makes chess easy. You want to have like sort of a main game plan. And the only thing that you really need to do, once you know this, you just keep an eye on what your opponent is doing. Because let's be honest, in lower rated games, your opponents are going to do a lot of crazy, weird, aggressive stuff that you just need to keep an eye on, because you want to be able to stick to the main plan, but sometimes you may have to deviate and take advantage of your opponent's mistake. So opponent plays bishop to c4. Now, what should we do? We simply continue with our plan. We know bishop d6 is what we want to play. Is there a reason to not do that? I mean, not one that I can see. So Just gonna do it. By the way, typical mistake in this position that I see my students do all the time. They just rush with the bishop on g4 because they're like so in love with the spin. Yes, that's like where the bishop belongs, but it's not a disaster if, let's say, opponent will play h3, not allow that. Okay, you don't need to like be married to this idea. Just find an actual girlfriend. What is like so tough about it? I mean, sure, I should be the one to do it first and then talk, but I mean, still, really, just stop getting married to this bishop g4 idea whenever you see like a knight on f3. Just have a little bit of patience. Get castle and then get the bishop to g4. And that is just game changer. So, typical mistake that I see, by the way, people start with rook e8, open file, which is a tempting move. I mean, don't get me wrong. You really want to have the rook on the open files, but it's even more annoying for our opponent to start with the bishop in. And we can get the pin, I mean the open file, let's say on the very next move. Now you remember I mentioned that on h3 we always step back, expecting him to play bishop e3, rook e1, or h3. Those are basically the moves that I see normally, or pawn to c3, or even bishop to e2, let's say. This is what I would be expecting, okay? From my experience, I've played this structure plenty of times, both against lower rated and stronger opponents. So we'll see. Maybe he's gonna be able to invent something interesting that I'm not familiar with. So yeah, on h3, remember we always slide back the bishop. We never take on f3. By the way, just to explain you a little bit the pawn structure that we have on the board, he's got this little majority with d5 that I didn't mention. That's pretty interesting. So I wanted to say that he's got this pawn majority with 4 against 3 on the queen side. So basically all the endgames are sort of suffering for black. You want to avoid exchanges as much as you can. It's true, we do get a ultra safe king, which is very nice, but the drawback of it is that our endgames are like pretty bad, okay? It's almost like we're down a pawn in the endgames. So you really want to be able to compensate with some dynamics, okay? So we get a bishop to g4, he goes d5. Now, you may be wondering, what is this crazy individual doing with that move? Well, I don't know. I wish I could tell. I'm supposed to know these things, but this is something very offbeat, okay? This is exactly why you're here, to just see how to deal with this offbeat variations, right? Okay, so he plays d5. Now, what are the options? Option 1, we can take, but that develops his queen, which I'm not like a huge fan of. We could play c5. That's, I think it's easier. It's probably not the best move from my experience according to the computer, but it's like usually pretty safe. So I think I'm just gonna stick with it just because it's like a little bit simpler, but I feel like the computer would come up with like maybe knight d7, dc6, play something active like knight e5, find counterplay, and so on. That could be the case, but it's pretty tricky. Also, queen c7, interesting move, just so we can play knight d7 and have the bishop defended. And queen c7 is creating a threat of bishop takes on h2, taking advantage of this pin that we created. So queen c7 could be a very decent move as well, which I might actually, I think that's best move, by the way. Now, could it be more instructive if I just play c5 and we play like a little bit slower? I feel like I just want to show you guys how the battery could potentially work out. So we'll check it after the game. My sort of rusty intuition of a retired 22 years old chess coach and offer says that queen c7 was best. Okay, not sure about that, but I think c5 it's perhaps like slightly worse, but I think definitely playable always. So yeah, I'm basically counting on the fact that we should be getting a pretty easy game, and I'll try to highlight some of the main attacking ideas that black has. So now I'm expecting opponent to either play h3 or bishop e3. or rook e1, or maybe bishop e2. Those are like the main moves. Maybe this one I'm gonna get it right, but the previous move, I had like a bunch of candidates. I think we're getting close to like 10 candidates for white, but I haven't managed to guess his move, so it was a little bit embarrassing, but hey, there we go. So maybe this time we're gonna do a little bit better from that perspective. We should see. I mean, these guys can cook up something interesting. But anyways, I think the main idea that we want to have is do bishop c7, queen d6, set up the battery, and then go like knight d7, probably just try to finish development. I know probably it's just a little bit better, just go knight d7, knight d5 directly, but I really want to show you guys how deadly the battery could be. You may like be a little bit surprised by this idea, but when the queen is getting in front of the bishop, it's actually pretty powerful. Goes rook e1. This move we managed to predict, very logical, occupying open file. Now, I could do bishop c7, queen d6. What I don't like about that is the fact that it's simply ignoring development of the knight, which is a little bit silly. Yeah, I think that's just silly, so I'm just gonna finish development and maybe later on we will be able to highlight the battery, but you know, you shouldn't like, even something like that is pretty juicy and could be very fun. You want to make sure that you still remain friends with the rest of your pieces. You don't want to like neglect anybody, okay? It's like you want to view your pieces as basically like a whole family. You want to make sure like get everybody involved, check up on them, see how they're doing, make sure they're happy, and then you make your decision. So that's why we gotta get a knight developed. Now, what this move actually achieves is, well, basically nothing but threatening to play some knight e5, and that is activating a little bit at least. So that will probably force in bishop e2. Then we have to sort of go for some trades, which I'm not like a huge fan of, but I mean, life is not perfect, guys. You cannot really like have anything that you want always, so you gotta like sort of grow up and accept it. I learned it the hard way, okay, so I can tell. So opponent goes queen to d3. Now this wasn't really one of my main candidates, but he's unpinning, so it makes some sort of sense. Now basically two main moves that come to mind are bishop takes on f3 because it's a capture and we always look for this forcing things. And there is also a knight e5 type of move, which could potentially solve the issue of our pawn structure because we could potentially undouble our pawns, which, hey, does not look that bad. I'm just gonna go for it. Now, also, before you do that, you wanna sort of visualize a little bit if there is anything interesting after knight e5, double attack, but on queen to e2, as long as I'm not missing anything, I don't think there's like a good way to continue this. So I like knight e5 just because it's aggressive and it's sort of forcing him to take on e5, repairing our pawn structure. Otherwise, we'll take on f3, doubling up white pawns, which is big strategical concession. So another reason why I'm like a huge fan of this knight e5 because it makes it very easy to predict what's gonna happen next, okay? And you could really sort of compare this with pool. So in order to be like a great snooker player or pool player, it's not about like potting a single ball, okay? That's kind of what you learn when you're like really making your first steps in chess. You learn, oh, one mover, back ranker, pick up 3 queen, pick up that, and this kind of stuff. Then when you like make your next steps, it's like, all right, I make a good move, and then it's gonna be the punchline. So you wanna like pot a ball, then you wanna make sure you control the cue ball so you have a good move or a good pot onto the next shot. So this is what we do with knight e5 here. It just makes it very easy for us to visualize that we're gonna have a good position in the future because it's very forcing and it's pretty easy for us to visualize what's gonna happen. Now after we make this move, we know, okay, f5, e4 potentially coming. We made a huge improvement strategically speaking because we no longer have the double pawns, and You know, the bishop that looks kind of passive now, at the end of the day, could be a monster bishop. I mean, just look at it. Now, guys, just like imagine if we could potentially go f5 and e4. For the moment, I mean, this bishop is not really like such a terrifying sniper on d6. Yeah, I mean, it's just like, honestly, this bishop is just like looking like they're holding a banana and trying to shoot the white king with a banana. That's not gonna be working. But if you play like f5, e4, this bishop is just now like a terrible sniper, almost mating immediately. So it has a little bit of potential, okay? I'm not necessarily saying that this potential will really materialize in anything concrete, just like my professional chess career, but there is some hope, okay? There's like 1% of hope this bishop will become active and then you may get rewarded. So, okay. What is white supposed to do at this point? Well, first of all, I think their bishop is now like looking pretty funny. But their position is not that bad yet. So I think they just need to watch out for this idea. And even though Ben Feingold would get pretty upset, they should be playing the move f3. Hitting the bishop and making sure e4 is going to be pretty hard for black to achieve. At the end of the day, we might be playing anyways because we're degens. We're Alex Manda subscribers, so we might not care. But just saying that's sort of what they need to do. Now with a3, I think this is not necessarily the move that I would have made. He probably is trying to go for b4 and try to get some queenside activity. He's kind of seizing that he's got a pawn majority on this side with 4 against 3, so I think the mindset is kind of correct, but we've got 4 against 3 here, so time to focus on this side. You really want to, guys, in general, focus on your stronger side, yeah? Don't play on your weak side. Always look for the positives and focus on that. Go f5, idea to go e4 next. And yeah, I mean, not sure I actually have so many league viewers on the channel, but I think like a good comparison is, let's say if you're like playing jungle, you always wanna, and I mean, not really playing jungle, but it's like a team game. You always wanna like figure out what's like the best player in your team, and you wanna try to play together with them and sort of ignore like the weaker players from the team. So basically, it's kind of similar in chess. I mean, you focus your stronger side and try to play on that. Try to play, yeah, with what you have. So we've got a little bit of pressure on the king side and a little bit of enthusiasm because we haven't made the blunder in like the previous 13 moves. So that is always something to look up for. And if we actually manage to get in e4, I mean, this bishop is no longer going to be shooting bananas, but it might become an actual deadly sniper. Opponent just ignoring my idea, he's just focusing on b4. So see, this is kind of like a typical mistake that low-rated players make. They're not thinking prophylactic, okay? They're not like, okay, what is my opponent trying to do? They're about, oh, what do I need to do? And sure, it's important to do something, but if you get mated, I mean, you may very well just want to defend against that, I guess. Just saying. Just continue with our idea. We basically achieve our dream with e4. We get a pawn to e4. And now, what is actually a move that you would be looking forward to play next, guys? He's probably going to do queen e3, queen c2. Those are like the main things that I'm expecting. Now, what are you going to be playing on the next move? Let's say he goes queen c2. I think that's a very interesting exercise to actually test out a little bit your dynamics. Because our bishop is now just activating all of a sudden. And we could potentially bring more pieces into the game. We've got like a variety of ways to do that. And I think it's pretty interesting to see how that variation might play out. I think we've got a choice between a number of queen moves after queen c2. That could be potentially going very aggressive. This is probably the most natural move after queen c2. Oh, he plays queen e3 instead. I mean, that's okay. It just gives us additional options to consider a move like f4. Sacrificing the pawn, definitely something you want to be 100% sure it works before you do it. So probably not gonna do that, but just saying it's an extra option that we want to keep an eye on. Now, you really want to think of the forcing moves, okay? Just like in snooker, you want to really be able to um, control the cue ball. So queen h4, hitting this pawn, most likely he will be playing the move g3. Hitting the queen, defending against mate, okay? What can we do? Probably a move like queen h3, bishop f3, trying to get the mate on g2. However, that can kind of easily be countered by his bishop f1. So queen h4, g3, then we'll have to retreat the queen. Now, h5 could be an interesting square. And then we still have this sort of ideas to play bishop f3 and break with f4. So probably that's the best move. Another interesting idea, by the way, you could think of, you could try to come up with another way of bringing more pieces onto the king side. And I think rook f6 comes to mind, trying to go for the rook lift, perhaps like this and bishop f3. But I think that's like wasting a little bit of time since the rook is already involved and could be used after we push the f pawn. So I think we start with the queen. Also, bishop takes on h2, barely crossed my mind. Queen h4, king g1, f4, I don't think that should work. And also, bishop f3, sometimes it's like an interesting sacrifice, so that after pawn takes queen h4, it's harder for them to protect h2. But once again, not really working because of f4, I believe. So I'm gonna start with the queen. They are mainly gonna play g3. f4 allows a premium move here. And g3 is a tempo move. h3 is another candidate, but I think it's not that good because it's not restricting the dark squared bishop. So after h3, I feel like now we could perhaps go for like a pretty beautiful shot, which you guys can try to come up with. There is, of course, nothing wrong with like the retreating move, just going bishop to h5, but I think we might have something even better. Just saying. I mean, I haven't calculated, but my intuition kind of tells me. I mean, who am I like trying to fool here? I'm like never calculating, but yeah, I think after h3, bishop f3 could potentially be an interesting move, sacrificing. Say he takes with a pawn, we pick up h3, but then the same kind of f4 idea does not seem very easy to refute. So I think that's perhaps fine for my opponent. I'm not sure, guys, okay? I'm not Stockfish. If you expect that, lower your expectation. Please chill. I mean, probably nobody was really expecting me to be Stockfish because I'm obviously not that good. But just saying. h3, bishop f3, interesting, probably not working. Then what do we do? Do we just lose? I mean, is h3 actually creating a threat? You think about it that way. Can he actually take our bishop? I mean, I'm not super sure they can take, because then we have queen h2 check, we infiltrate. So maybe h3, how about we come up with a pretty useful move that is just ignoring white's threat? How could you guys like try to improve your position there while not making it super obvious? I think a move like rook e8 would be very useful there. Just doing this and be like, all right, can I have my bishop mate? Just get a bishop and potentially sacrifice take on h2, hunt down the king, and probably we have a very good attack. You'll just have to wait, and we're gonna go over it in the post-analysis game. But so far, we see the most expected move, g3. We just slide back to h5. And we have a huge threat of playing f4 in a lot of positions. And the queen is specifically nice because it's also controlling e8. Because in a lot of lines after queen e4, rook e8, white had the option of sacrificing the queen for the rooks with unclear play. But now the queen defends that, and white will no longer have that defensive resource. So with this move, I mean, bishop f3, f4. If we can play that, that's crushing. Probably just f4 right away, since queen e4, we already figured it out that it's losing to rook e8 because they will have to move the queen and the rook remains undefended. And you have to understand why does that happen? Because they have no development. That is why they teach you in schools that you should have your rooks connected. So that's why we just play f4. goes queen e4, rook e8, win 3 rook, because they're breaking one of the most important fundamental rules, which says, dude, you're playing an opening, just connect your rooks. What is wrong with you? So, yeah, let's see. He's not like forced to take, but if he's not taking that poison pawn onto e4, well, that's gonna be, anyways, making a lot of progress for us, since we have ideas of taking on g3, opening up this rook, which I told you like a few moves ago that it was already like pretty active, so that's why we prioritize bringing the queen over. And yeah, how can they like actually avoid this? They could play queen d2, but I mean, it's a move that's like so ugly. And I think against queen d2 we have a very interesting little idea that is not very natural actually, but I think it's a very strong move. So on queen to d2, I think we can come up with like a pretty innovative pawn sack. And I think, well, the idea is that g3 is pretty weak, but it's defended by 2 pawns. Well, we could go for e3, sacrificing the pawn, and then this guy remains pretty weak. We can take with the bishop. I mean, why do we have no pawns next to the king? What is this? This is just gonna be like a homeless king. I mean, it's just gonna be like nobody protecting him. It's just gonna be the weakest king in the world. I mean, I cannot express how weak that king is gonna be. Just think about it. I mean, this is not gonna be a position that White will be able to get away and defend. Usually when the enemy king is, yeah, actually I'm glad that we get to show this idea on the board. So kind of forcing him to take, otherwise we take on f2 and we take on g3 and we manage to accomplish the same thing. And after he takes, this remains undefended. It's just like nobody's defending the castle anymore. It's just they just got onto like a vacation, and we can just like hang around into like White's castle right now. It's pretty funny, for sure. So yeah, f e3, f takes on g3. That's gonna happen. But yeah, what I wanted to actually mention is that, okay, we play queen h5, heading a huge threat of f4, and White played b4, trying to get some counterplay of his own. But this was already a little bit like too slow. His position was already very dangerous. He should have tried to play more prophylactic. Go something like queen g5, because there's like a huge attack that's about to come with f4. I mean, what is Grandma Josephine doing in this position when you need to like, house is burning, you need to defend your king, just worrying about like makeup, go b4, doing nothing. So okay, after queen to d3, you see that this tempo could have been potentially used to defend the king, which is now, yeah, we're gonna be easily taking advantage of it. Taking, he's forced to take back with the king, otherwise we're gonna be winning a rook. And then we've got a million of winning moves. I mean, you can guys like come up with one, but I think there's like a forced checkmate in 2 moves, probably more than that, but that's the one that I can see, and that's the one that I highlight. So now he will be taking with the king. We pick up the h2 pawn, then on king f1 we have a very nice checkmate in 1 move. And not taking the pawn, that's not gonna be made, because he could block with a queen or with a bishop, and it's gonna be prolong the fight for like maybe just a couple more moves. But we could go for the bishop check there on h3, and that is gonna be checkmate, in fact. Not sure if you guys can like actually visualize this, but I'm pretty sure you guys can do it. So if you already made it this far into the video, I mean, congratulations for listening to my annoying voice for more than like 5 seconds. I mean, big clap for you. So yeah, now opponent just has to grab, no real candidate, and this is like typical beginner sort of thing. What about to checkmate them? Well, look at these pieces. They're playing with white, opening with like an extra move, but they've got no development. We're actually the one that's like better developed. So as I was saying, he's like trying to avoid this direct mate. I could like pick up the rook, but I'm just gonna go queen h3 because I think he's just even stronger. There is nothing wrong with that, but yeah, you guys can try to visualize the mate once again after king takes on f2. That is gonna be way simpler. There's nothing wrong with taking the rook. Perhaps for you it's gonna be even better to just keep it simple, collect the rook. But now queen h3, forcing him pick up the pawn, and we're just transposing back into the line that we just calculated. And yeah, that is gonna be simply giving him no counterplay, or at least that I can see. So he's getting down to his last minute. We're both actually getting down on the clock in this game. A pretty fought battle by both sides. I mean, we still have to do the analysis where we're gonna go over whether it was good to play c5 or not. I mean, my intuition says queen c7 is better if you remember. I mean, if you stick for that moment, I mean, we're gonna get to discuss it. So yeah, now we just take and how are we gonna checkmate him in one, guys? This is important because you don't want to mess around here too much. Okay, maybe you can at this point since a lot of moves are winning, but there's gonna be a pretty straightforward checkmate, if that's a word. So he just resigns because on king f1 there was bishop h3 checkmate. So okay, analysis. He played d5. So far everything is by the book. He goes d5, and okay, this is not like a super strong engine, but it says queen c7 is top move at like a pretty low depth, which yeah, I kind of had the feeling that just queen c7, 97 and 95 playing it this way could work, but it was a bit complicated. So I mean, as long as c5 is not terrible, I think it's easier to play. See, now the position is just equal according to the computer instead of black having a slight edge. Game continued, rook e1, 97. So yeah, just to show you, if I had to play bishop c7 and say he does just like sort of a random developing move, if we get to this position, I mean, this is still like okay. After g3 97 you get developed, but I mean, he plays bishop f4. This is pretty awkward. We have to play like 95 or queen b6. I'm not a huge fan of this, so yeah, I think just getting developed was the right call. With an even position, queen e3 a bit of a mistake, and here you can notice that clearly 95 is the best move. Yeah, look at it. So queen d3, 95 best move by far. Well, kind of. I mean, it is practically the best move, I'm telling you, and it's because it just makes the game so easy and straightforward. Just remember this concept, guys. Don't think about potting the ball. Think about like potting the ball and then controlling the cue ball. That's like the most important thing in chess, just like in snooker. So played f5. He had to play f3. I mean, once again, probably there's like an e4 move and just sacrificing. I told you this could be an option, but I haven't calculated it. Actually, black has a crashing tactic in this position, which you can try to pause the video and find. Because, well, instead of queen h4, that's trying to hit h2 and this, there is g3, defending both. And the bishop sack won't work because the queen covers that. But even better, just go bishop takes on h2 first. And then when queen h4 comes, he has no time for g3 and pick up the rook next with a winning position. So apparently f3 was not saving either, and after that we just get like a crashing position. h3 was a bit of a better move, but I was just like wondering, guys, if we can completely ignore this and play like rook a e8. That's probably what I would have done. And the computer says this is fine. And instead of taking, which is quite dubious, best for white is queen g5 with an even position just because it's forcing the queens off and we're gonna play an endgame. I don't mind playing an equal position. It's kind of like a bummer that we would have had to slow down a little bit, but that's like life sometimes. So yeah, I mean, bishop h5 a move too, but I probably would have liked to sack because the initiative just looked very interesting after something like this. Let's say opening up the rook if he starts running away. Yes, we don't have like a clear mate, but with threats such as g3 and rook f2, I mean, he's playing basically like down the rook and the bishop. I mean, do you care that we sacrifice the piece? What's good for him to have these extra pieces if they're not in the game? So I think black is just winning here. But he could have gone queen g5 there, which was kind of safe and close to equal. However, after g3 and then f4, that's just a crashing position. He cannot take e4 because of rook e8, and as I was saying, because the rooks are not connected, this just allows this beautiful tactic, and we would have just won a lot of material, and then the rest was pretty simple. After e3, we just got a first mate, and we managed to get a pretty smooth and easy Tartakower win. So you see, guys, why this is my main recommendation against both the two knights, and also if he was to play classical variation, I really love the Tartakower in this position as well. So